Hello, everybody. This is Joe Firestone for Empowering Democracy. Okay, I don't see Greg here yet. I do expect him, but it just started storming very heavily where he is in Georgia. He's supposed to be getting a couple of inches of rain over the next couple of hours. So uh, whether he will be available or not, I don't know. But of course, he has the link. And I think Dolores will be joining us also, but she is finishing up her earlier show, Around the World with Brandy and Dee. I was over there myself until just a few minutes ago. So tonight we have a different topic. It's about empowering democracy, of course. I'll go through some of the background. Okay. One of the things that has been undermining our democracy for a very long time is austerity in U.S. economic policy. Since the neoliberals took over the government in the late 70s and the early 80s, they've been playing balanced budget games, even though they almost never balanced the budget, and deficit terrorism games, okay, as well, and harping on how the debt is something we can't afford, and then proceed to increase the debt by having tax cuts and big deficits with respect to tax cuts. I'm being joined now by Dolores Pierce, who is the co-host of Around the World with Brandy and Dee. Hi, Dolores.
Oh, Joe, very happy to be here.
Thank you. Very happy to have you. Can you increase your volume a little bit? I think you're a little low.
Okay, how's that?
I think it's still too low.
Huh.
Okay, wait a minute. Hang on a second. Let me see what I can do from this end. I have some limited control over mics. So let me see if I can adjust your mic from here and make you a bit louder. Okay, try that now.
Hello, everybody.
That has made a big difference.
Okay, great.
Okay, that has done well. Okay, so I was giving people a little background on the topic for tonight, which is the coin and the speech. And I was basically making the point that since the neoliberals took over our government in the late 70s, okay, and the early 80s, they've been playing this game of deficit terrorism with us, calling for balanced budgets and balanced budget amendments. And then the Republicans at least get into power. And what they do then is, of course, they go for big tax cuts, which increase the deficit. Okay. And then they terrorize about increasing the deficit, and we got to do something about the increasing deficit as soon as the Democrats come in.
Right.
Want the Democrats to spend on behalf of their constituents, while they, of course, are doing tax cuts on behalf of their constituents. So they've been playing this game for 40 years, and in the middle, the social safety net has been getting cut, and America has been becoming a much more mean society and a society that is pretty much in control, okay, of business interests that are treating employees in an increasingly merciless way. And we see the effects all around us with the decline, okay, of unionism and the contributions that unions made to the safety net are going by the board. And we just see a country that's increasingly angry, increasingly frustrated, increasingly mean, and finding authoritarian solutions increasingly attractive. And of course, that undermines democracy and is largely responsible for the rise of Trump and other authoritarians on both the Republican and the Democratic side. Authoritarianism on the Democratic side, of course, takes a different form, a form that calls for unity and conformity within democratic circles, but which similarly favors the interests of the corporations and the rich. Authoritarianism on the Republican side takes the form of appealing to and supporting authoritarian movements that look very much like fascist movements and that employ the rhetoric, okay, of fascist movements and that rely increasingly on violence also. And of course, if it looks like a fascist and walks like a fascist and quacks like a fascist, then it's a fascist, right?
Exactly.
So we got that particular problem here and becoming increasingly serious. So, uh, in recent years, one of the ways the Republicans have been going at the problem of beating the Democrats is that when they get a chance, when they get into power, especially in the House, they move to try to attack and cut the social safety net, and they use the debt ceiling as a tool to cut spending that has already been appropriated by Congress. And of course, to advocate for cuts to deficit spending. And if you know anything about the MMT approach to economics, then you know that when the government runs deficit, red ink for the government is black ink for the private sector.
Exactly.
And of course, if it's directed in the right way towards the private sector, it's black ink for people who need the money, both in the working class and in the middle class as well. So they do this, and in the aftermath of the recession of 2008, 2009, 2010, this resulted in austerity policies at the federal level, trying to cut federal spending as much as possible so that we got closer and closer to surplus. And considering that we were uh, also cutting trade deficit somewhat, okay, as well, uh, we needed larger federal deficits to counteract that. And we were not getting that because people were trying to get down to deficits of 3%, 2%, 1%, getting as close to having uh, having surpluses, okay, as we could possibly get under the Democrats in the end of the first Obama administration and the second Obama administration. That's what was going on. They were trying to get closer and closer to surplus, helped by the Republicans, in fact, demanded by the Republicans, caused by compromises which the Democrats made with the Republicans. And these cuts, especially to civilian budgets, at first, these were cuts across the board, cuts in military budgets too. But as the years wore on, the military managed to get their share, but civilian programs did not. And this was under a Democratic administration. Then Trump came in and he got really great tax cuts for wealthy people. Uh, but the rest of the private sector was getting starved, and the workers, of course, were getting starved, and the middle class was getting starved also. And fewer people were part of the middle class. The neoliberal period saw the size of the middle class shrink from roughly 65% at the start to roughly 45% now. And so we have an incredible shrinking middle class on our hands, largely due to the economic policies, okay, of neoliberalism over the 40-year period. Well, it's more like 45 years now, since some of those policies were started under Jimmy Carter, okay, as well. Uh, Now we have a situation where the Republicans twice saw their debt ceiling games being effective in terms of their attempts to cut budgets and cut the deficits of the federal government in areas that were important to the middle class, okay, and the working class, weakening the social safety net. Uh, there was a boost caused by the panic that set in due to the pandemic. And in those years, large deficits were run, and some of it was getting through to people due to the direct cash stimulus from the recovery checks. In other words, that was tending to temper things and make things a little better for the middle class and the working class. But here we are again with the economy going well and starting to expand. All the Republicans can talk about now is the deficit and the debt, okay, and the inflation, and they're threatening a debt ceiling crisis now that they have the House. They're threatening that they're not going to raise the debt limit so the federal government can borrow any more money when it has to run deficits. Now, it should be clear to all of you that when the government is running deficits, it's running deficits because the Congress has appropriated enough spending that the end result is a deficit for the federal government. So what they're playing is a game of take it back. They agreed to certain spending before, and now they want to operate as Indian givers and take that back through using the debt ceiling crisis as a tool. So we come again to a third serious debt ceiling crisis. We had a serious one in the first half in the summer of 2011. We had a serious one in 2013. Both of those led to austerity budgets here in the United States, made for the slowest recovery since World War II. And here come the Republicans again with the Freedom Caucus and all the terrorism about, we can't afford Social Security, we can't afford Medicare. It's all fiscally irresponsible because, of course, the only source of federal money is the taxpayers. And so you're getting these debt terrorism stories that is spreading again, and definite intention on the part of the Republicans to freeze the federal budget, to cut the federal budget, and to use debt ceiling crises as a tool. So now that everybody is seeing this go on, all of a sudden, we have a spate of articles that have appeared between January 5th and January 12th, dealing with or referring to the use of the platinum coin to counter the debt ceiling terrorists, specifically to mint $1 trillion coins or larger coins so that there'll be no need to sell any more debt instruments for a while, because you can use the proceeds from the coin to uh, to increase the balance in the Treasury spending account, which in turn would allow the federal government to keep on spending and also to pay off some of the debt, so that the gap between the debt limit and the size of the national debt, which is now at 31.5 trillion, by the way, uh, that gap would be larger, because with the $1 trillion coins, we'd be paying off parts of the national debt and restoring then the ability to borrow of the federal government if it wanted to borrow. But also, if the coin is large enough, then there would be revenues from the coin that would be large enough so the federal government would not have to borrow any money anymore to cover deficit spending and to begin to repay the debt. That's the ideal situation, anyway. So, this spate of articles, about 11 articles within 7 days in various publications on this subject, promises to be a preface to a veritable storm of articles from all kinds of sources that we may get between now and when the debt ceiling crisis gets very serious. When will that be? Nobody knows exactly when, but most probably we'll get very close to exceeding the debt limit by February or March, and the Treasury will have to use special measures to prevent itself from going over the debt limit. They'll be juggling books, they'll be postponing certain spending to wait for taxes to come in. They'll do all kinds of special tricks. When they've done this in the past, they have shown a capability to stretch out the period before we actually get to a strong debt ceiling crisis. Maybe as far as the end of the fiscal year, they would be able to play games to stretch it out. So we might be getting debt ceiling articles going on, okay, until the fall, because the Republicans and Democrats may not have settled this. So we might be looking at all kinds of writings on the platinum coin. Now, thus far, there is only one full-length book on the platinum coin, and yours truly is the author of that book.
Yes.
And I do have something new to present to you tonight, but before I do that, I do want to share the screen to show my ebook. So let me go over that. The ebook is a Kindle ebook, and it's on sale, of course, at Amazon. This book is, did it come up? It probably did. Here it is. Fixing the Debt Without Breaking America: Austerity, the $1 trillion Coin, and Ending Debt Ceiling, Sequester, and Budgetary Crises, which is exactly what we're coming up on. The solution that I suggest in this book is still just as current as when I first wrote it, which was in 2013. Then I did a revised edition in 2014, which is the edition being sold by Amazon right now. The book is rated here at about 215 pages, but I swear it's got to be more than that. I don't think they translated it right. I think it's closer to 300 pages. Anyway, it's got a lot of meat to it, has a lot of content to it, Let me see if I can look inside here and find. Uh, it's got the preface. Let me see if I can get the contents. Uh, they're not allowing people to see the contents, but I cover just about every aspect of the coin, the political aspects, the legal aspects of the coin, the historical origins of the platinum coin, the way the platinum coin works, the implications of the platinum coin, the things that can be funded with the proceeds from the platinum coin, all kinds of stuff like that is covered in this particular book. Okay, so I did want you to know this book was available because for some reason there are people in the MMT movement, lots of people, okay, in the MMT movement who ignore my book. I am not sure why they do or why they have. I think it has to do with perceptions of strategy on the part of some of the leaders of the MMT movement who, while having an initial high degree of enthusiasm for using the platinum coin, began to think around uh, 2011 that it was not good strategy to talk the platinum coin or to push the platinum coin. And that was true for many years. I think that view may be changing now because recently, as we'll get into later, I see Stephanie Kelton beginning to push the use of the platinum coin again. And that's been a long time in coming. I'm very, very pleased to see it. And I'll talk up that somewhat later in this stream. So let me no longer share this tab. Okay, put it away. There, that should be it. And now I want to share a rework paper that I recently did to make it current. Let me get back to this and share the screen here. Share the screen with my Word document. Okay, the title of this stream is The Coin and the Speech. And that's because it deals with both the coin and a speech that the president might make just after he has minted the platinum coin to solve the debt ceiling crisis. Now, I have to warn you that I am dealing with a particular platinum coin speculation here, or platinum coin policy here, specifically the $100 trillion plan. Now, other people during this period of time are going to be talking about the $1 trillion plan, or the $2 trillion plan, or at most the $5 trillion plan. Uh, Maybe the more daring among them will talk about a $10 trillion plan, but that's probably as far as they're going to go. Why? Because they won't want to appear too crazy. In other words, they wouldn't want to appear like they're interested in changing the whole system, but just that they're trying to cope with a limited problem, specifically the debt ceiling problem, and stop the Republicans from running to debt ceiling terrorism every chance they get. So there are going to be $1 trillion plans, $2 trillion plans, $5 trillion plans, different variations of using the platinum coin to get by the debt ceiling crisis. I have certain aims. My aim is to end austerity and to create policy space for all kinds of programs that progressives would like to see. And that's what the $100 trillion coin is about. So I'm going to start reading now. The $100 trillion HVPCS option. What's HVPCS? It's high value platinum coin senior option is the one I favor for solving both the debt ceiling problem and the larger political problem of ending austerity, justified by, quote, we're running out of money, unquote. The debt ceiling would no longer be an issue if the Treasury immediately pay off the Fed and intragovernmental debt and was poised with money in its account to pay off the rest of the debt subject to the limits as it falls due. Not all at once. In other words, the $100 trillion coin I talk about here would, of course, have enough money to pay it off all at once. But that would inject too much money into the private sector at once and would be inflationary. But if the debt is paid off along with the interest as it falls due over a 30-year period, then it would not be inflationary because the only inflationary part of it would be the interest payments, okay, which could be absorbed by the economy in most situations. In other words, all the rest of it is just taking money out of the money supply for the time being. Okay, when the debt instruments was sold, and putting the money back when the principal from the debt instruments is paid off at the time that it falls due. So there's no special inflationary effect of this. I've done a closer analysis of this, a more detailed analysis. That is in my book. There's a whole chapter on the coin impacts expected in terms of inflation. And the analysis shows that it is not inflationary. It's also based on an analysis that was done by Scott Fullwiler, one of the MMT economists, who's not as well known as some of the others, but who, from an analytical point of view, is certainly one of the top 5 of the MMT economists. And he did a great analysis of inflation, and I rely on Scott's analysis in my book. Nor would there be any justification for austerity policies going on with the reading here if the Treasury had a public purse with 65 trillion or so of unearmarked funds in it. Why do I give 65T as the figure? Because I figure that the interest is going to cost roughly 3.5T over the time it takes to pay off. And I figure we already owe 31.5T. So to pay off the whole debt would require roughly 35T, right? So therefore, there would be 65T left of funds that were not earmarked that could be spent to cover future deficit spending. So, to my mind, this is the progressive alternative for solving the predicted upcoming debt ceiling crisis of 2023. The alternative that changes the political context of fiscal policy debates for the foreseeable future by taking austerity, quote unquote, off the table. Okay? It also gives progressives, that is, this 100T solution, gives progressives enough time to fight a major political battle that ought to and must occur. The battle to free the Federal Reserve from control by Wall Street and banking interests, and to make it accountable to the people by placing it under the authority of the Treasury Department and our nationally elected executive, the President of the United States. In other words, I favor that proposal. The Federal Reserve is certainly performing an executive function for the Republic. yet it is an independent agency. That is a violation of the Constitution of the United States. According to the Constitution of the United States, there are three branches of government: the executive, the legislative, which is, by the way, the first branch of government according to the Constitution, and the judicial. There is no place for executive agencies outside of the control of the president, according to the Constitution, in my view. That is known as the unitary executive theory. There are some pretty unsavory personalities that have used that theory. Some conservatives adhere to that particular theory. I, of course, am nowhere near a conservative, but I happen to accept that theory too, at least with respect to the Fed. It should not be independent because independent means unaccountable to the people. It also should not be independent because it's independent to the smokescreen. Because of the way the executive recruits people to the Fed, those people are always from the financial industry. They're most of the time from Wall Street or from some of the universities, and they always end up defending the interests of Wall Street and never the interests of the people. That's why they need to be held accountable by being part of the executive branch that is accountable to all the people, or at least would be if we could get rid of all the dirty money in politics. And as you know, a lot of this series, Empowering Democracy, is about dumping the corruption. And if we could get that done, and if we could get the Fed accountable to the people through the president, we would suddenly be in very fine shape as a democracy, I believe. Anyway, what about inflation using PCS? PCS is platinum coin seigniorage. Isn't intrinsically inflationary, as I show in my book on fixing the debt, as I just mentioned. Now let's turn to the political aspects of implementing the 100p coin. Here's a speech the president might give after minting the coin, depositing it in secret at the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, and getting it credited by the Federal Reserve. I understand that some people may believe that the Fed's crediting the coin is a big problem for the Treasury. I discussed this question in my book. Suffice it to say that the president has the legal tools necessary to make the chair of the Fed and the board of governors, of the Fed to basically force the crediting of the coin by the New York Federal Reserve. It isn't an option for them. It would be mandated by the tools the president can use. So let me get Greg in here again. Hey, Greg.
That was a heck of a storm.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I hope all goes well from here on in. What I'm doing now is reading through the paper you asked me to write. And I'll supply you with a copy of it after this is over tonight.
Oh, perfect.
Okay?
I've been sitting in my truck watching everything on the show in case anybody's wondering where I was at.
Oh, good. So you know what I said then about it. So I won't have to go.
You won't have to bring me up to speed because I was watching from my phone when I had to get to safety.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll continue on then. Now let's turn to the. I guess I discussed this question in my book. But for now, let's assume that the president overcame all difficulties and that the Treasury had succeeded in getting the $100 trillion credited into the U.S. Men's Public Enterprise Fund account. And then sweeping, quote unquote, the nearly $100 trillion in seniorage, because there would be a little expense which gets subtracted from the total value to get the seniorage, which the executive branch would have incurred in getting the coin to the mint and getting the coin to the Fed and deposited in the Fed. But it would be able to sweep the nearly $100 trillion in seniorage into the Treasury General account. Again, seniorage is the profit from the coin, the difference between the coin face value and the expenses in creating the coin and getting it up to the Fed. Roughly speaking, I estimate that these days might be $4,500 to mint the coin and get it up to the Fed. So the amount of money that would be swept into the Treasury General account would be $100 trillion, maybe minus $4,500. So almost entirely $100 trillion. So here is the speech itself. If the president wanted to emulate the great Democratic presidents of the past, end austerity, and decide to rise above the debt ceiling controversy, safeguard the social safety net, and do something really, really important from the perspective of history by using $100 trillion coin seniorage to short circuit the upcoming fights over the debt ceiling and the budget, then here is the sort of speech he might give. My fellow Americans, until now, the Treasury has been borrowing the money the government created back from the private sector in order to cover our deficit spending. So the national debt has been steadily growing. That's silly. According to the Constitution, the government this government of the people, by the people, and for the people is the ultimate source of all U.S. money. So why should we ever borrow our money back and pay interest on such a loan when we create new money anytime by the authority of the Constitution and Congress? Congress has also imposed a debt ceiling. So if and when we reach it, we can't even borrow back our own money without congressional approval anyway. And during the past 11 years, Congress has been using the need to raise the debt ceiling as an excuse to extort cuts in safety net and discretionary programs that the majority of Americans support. So on my order, and in accordance with legislation passed by Congress in 1996, and with the U.S. Code, the U.S. Mint has issued $100 trillion using a single 1-ounce platinum coin and deposited it at the New York Fed. It is legal tender, so the Fed credited the Mint's public enterprise fund account with $100 trillion in U.S. dollar credits using its unlimited authority from Congress to create them. These credits are called, in the parlance of the Federal Reserve, reserves. $100 trillion in new reserves. The minting of money by the Treasury is not inflationary because the Fed will put our platinum coin into its vault and keep it there permanently out of circulation. Who could buy it from them anyway? And the Treasury will use the $100 trillion in USD credits it got in return for the coin only to pay back the national debt and to spend what Congress has already approved, which is only a small fraction of these credits and far from the amount needed to cause inflation. Now, of course, we have a current inflation problem. I'm neglecting that in this speech. But it hasn't been caused by overspending. It has been caused by price gouging and supply chain problems. I don't want to go into that here. Anyway, going on with the speech, my action ends any possibility of a debt ceiling crisis now or of repeated debt ceiling crises because we have no further need to borrow our own money back in the markets. And that's why we don't need the Freedom Caucus or other Republicans or even my fellow Democrats to agree to raise the debt ceiling anymore. In addition, with about 65T in the general account to use for future deficit spending, there now is also no reason for any sequesters or for austerity budgets to reduce the deficit. Reducing the government's deficit is not really good for its own sake, because each dollar of deficit reduction is a dollar less in net government financial additions to the non-government sector, including, of course, the private sector. So deficit reduction, which includes, of course, us. So deficit reduction for its own sake is something we all should want to avoid, and cutting spending should only be justified in terms of the impact of that spending on the economy. For example, we might cut spending to trim inflation, or we might cut spending of a particular kind because it's a bad program. But if a program isn't doing a good job, then it should be cut. But if it is benefiting Americans and achieving public purpose, then it should never go under the knife. With the 100T in the Treasury General Account, the TGA, the Treasury has plenty of money, much more than we need, in fact, to pay for all appropriations Congress has already approved for and may approve later on, approved for 2023 and may approve later on, including all deficit spending. And again, we won't have to borrow our own money back either to repay debts or to implement future deficit spending. So we will pay all government debts, which will come due in 2023, 2024, and thereafter. I might have said thereafter for 30 years, because there are going to be some 30-year bonds that people will be holding. Treasury securities and all other debts included. We will also pay back all debts held by other agencies of government in the Federal Reserve. When we do this, we will lower the national debt by about 12T, because I'm estimating that's how much the Treasury owes other agencies and the Federal Reserve. I may be off in that particular estimate. If so, then some of this would change. When we do this, we'll lower the national debt by about 12T, reducing the debt burden by about 37% by the end of 2024, and creating, actually, I might have said by the end of 2023, depends on how fast they do it, and creating an actual Social Security trust fund at the Fed as a sub-account of the Treasury General Account. Now, right now, the Social Security Trust Fund is not a trust fund. It's a paper record. But we will, in doing this, create an actual trust fund as a sub-account of the Treasury General Account with $2.8 trillion in bank reserves in it. And again, to do this, we won't have to borrow any of our own money back. And we will also reduce our interest costs on the outstanding national debt all through the remainder of 2023, 2024, and beyond, until it is all paid off. None of the 100T in new credits created by our actions is money, quote unquote, in the private sector economy until the Treasury spends it. Since it's not money in the private sector economy, it can't cause inflation until the Treasury spends it. For now, it is just capability to spend, awaiting the appropriations of Congress to mandate deficit spending, should it need to compensate for the reduction in demand, probably close to 10% of GDP right now, caused by our own desire to save, which we want to do our best to facilitate, by the way, and your desire to import goods from foreign nations, which we also want to facilitate, as long as the foreign nations want to sell their goods to us. What I'm saying here is that there's demand leakage each year due to our own desire to save. And we don't want to stop that language. We want to facilitate it. And there's demand leakage also because we buy goods from foreign nations. We also want to facilitate that. But of course, if we're going to have leakage of 10% to savings and to the foreign sector of the economy, we have to make up for that with deficit spending. so that we are prepared to employ all Americans who want to work full time at a living wage with good fringe benefits, including an enhanced Medicare for all, in other words. We have created $100 trillion in new credits, even though we probably needed less than that to get over this deficit ceiling crisis, because we wanted to cover anticipated deficit spending and debt repayment until at least 2033. The reason for that is that I wanted to have enough capability created in the Treasury account so that the national debt could be completely paid off, except for a small amount in very long term Treasury debt, still not mature by 2052. I should have said 2052 there. And all projected federal deficits covered over the next 10 years, even if extraordinary deficit spending needed to be performed without further borrowing over this period. Of course, we can always make new coins if our projections about future deficits turn out to be wrong, as long as Congress does not modify current law. But I thought it would be best to ensure that all 31.5T plus of the quote debt burden unquote can be completely eliminated from our political concerns, and also to provide enough funds in our spending account at the Fed so that it would be very clear to Congress and all newly elected representatives and senators that even though they, as required by the Constitution, continue to control the purse strings, the national purse is very, very full, and that we would be able to cover from the Treasury general account whatever deficit spending for the public purpose, including for full employment, Medicare for all, infrastructure, education, and other things that Congress, in its wisdom, chooses to appropriate now before the next election and for some elections to come. My friends, what we've created by minting this coin is policy space for Congress to use to meet all the various serious problems America faces. It will no longer make any sense to say, quote, we can't afford it, and to use that as an excuse not to pass a law that will have obvious benefits for the American people. For example, it will no longer be possible to say we can't afford to pass an enhanced Medicare for all bill that would fully insure Americans for all common medical and dental expenses, including prescription drugs with no copays and no exclusions, except for purely elective procedures, often cosmetic in nature. It will no longer be possible to say we can't afford a more general social safety net that we have today. The failures of private retirement plans over the past 30 years are well known, and the crash of 2008 has been a catastrophe for middle class savings. So, 2 legs of the 3-legged retirement school we used to hear about are broken through no fault of those who have lost both savings and retirement income. Social Security must take up that slack so our seniors won't have to face poverty in retirement. We must take care of our own here in America, and by minting the 100T coin, I've shown that we can afford to do this. It will also no longer be possible to say we can't afford to create a job guarantee program, providing job opportunities at a living wage and with good fringe benefits to everyone wanting a full-time job who can't find one in the private sector. We certainly can afford to do that, and it will end unemployment in the sense that anyone who wants a full-time job will always have one available performing valued services for their local community. It will also no longer be possible to say that we can't afford to eliminate student loan debts of young people so that they are not debt slaves to banks for 20 years or even the rest of their lives in some cases. Of course, we can afford to give them relief so that they have an opportunity to build their lives. There are also many, many other programs we'll be able to afford within the policy space created by the 100T coin, including meeting our vital education, infrastructure, energy, and most importantly, Green New Deal needs to meet our environmental and climate emergency challenges. In short, the 100T coin we've minted in will allow us to end austerity and its politics in the United States. We still have plenty to occupy us because we'll have to spend our time talking about whether particular policies will or won't actually benefit us. That's what we should be doing anyway. Instead of looking at the world wearing green eye shades all the time and always asking of any new policy, quote, can we afford this, unquote? Quote, is it deficit neutral, unquote? Quote, is it fiscally responsible, unquote? Does it meet the, quote, Cutco, unquote, or quote, PAYGO, unquote, rules? So good night, my fellow Americans. Rest well, knowing that our beloved country won't be defaulting on any of its debts when the debt ceiling is reached. And I've prevented this without going over the legal debt ceiling or borrowing any more by providing money for spending mandated appropriations in compliance with the laws authorizing platinum coin seigniorage while supporting the Constitution's prohibition against our government ever defaulting on its debts. And by the way, that prohibition is in the 14th Amendment and also in another format, slightly in the 8th article of the Constitution as well. That's not widely known. I've also removed any need for sequesters or for budgets that will cut needed services just for the sake of reducing the deficit. Rest well also knowing that the long night of government austerity that has been shaping our politics for decades and that was about to be reinforced by the Republican Party in the House of Representatives is finally over. We now know that we can afford to do the things we know how to do to meet the challenges we face and create bright futures for us all. The USA will always pay its debts in US dollars, according to the terms of the contracts it has concluded and in line with the pension payments and other obligations that it owes. Neither you nor the rest of the world need ever doubt that again. Nor need you ever think that our government is running out of money for the things we must do. We can never run short of money unless Congress refuses voluntarily to use its unlimited constitutional authority to make more of it. But as long as it delegates to me the authority to create high-value platinum coins to cover our needs, you can be sure that running out of U.S. money will never happen. So then there's the question of the reaction. There would be a spectacular uproar in the Congress and the press over the president's speech and his minting of the big coin. All kinds of overblown and downright crazy claims would be made because the president's action would shock people. Everyone would have a tough time getting their minds around it, and the media would report on what was going on in a very sensationalist way, using stereotypes created by the neoliberal perspective that journalists at places like the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, and MSNBC, and I should have added Scott, Fox, are superficially well schooled in. Places like CNBC and Fox would be absolutely foaming at the mouth in response to something like this. And Jay Powell might very well resign over it, since he'd be forced to have the Fed credit the coin. There would be an immediate move in Congress to impeach the president and repeal the 1996 law that enabled his action. These moves would fail, however. The move to impeach would fail in the Senate. The move to repeal the coin seigniorage law would probably fail in the Senate too. But even if a coalition of Republicans and dinos, quote unquote, got it through the Congress, the president would simply veto it. The opposition couldn't possibly get the 2/3 vote necessary to override the veto. Even if by some miracle repeal got through a veto, however, it would be too late. The coin would have done its work, and the hot tea would be in the Treasury General account, a fait accompli, and a vivid demonstration that the government can create as much money as it wants and can only run out of money by choice. However, the president would then have to defend himself with a political campaign aimed at persuading the public that his move was a bold and liberating one, and he should also begin that campaign by explaining the issuance and deposit of the first 100T coin in a high-profile TV address to the public, like the one presented above. In my book, I've covered likely political objections in more detail. What I want to emphasize here is that the president's job after he mints the 100T coin will be a continuous effort to sell, quote unquote, his action by constantly emphasizing what results or is likely to result from minting the coin. Let the Austerians say what they will say. Let them bleat about, quote, socialism, unquote, and, quote, Biden the crazy dictator, unquote, and, quote, big government, unquote, all they want. Their main substantive objections will be that the executive branch is encroaching on Fed independence, and that is sure to be inflation coming from the new expectations people will have as a result of using the coin's proceeds to pay off the national debt and cover deficit spending. There won't be any inflation, however, and as it fails to materialize, the president needs to rub that fact in the face of the inflation hawks. He must never fail to point out that their inflation expectations are based on bankrupt economic theories and that he is paying down the national debt quickly and in large proportions so that in a few years most of it will be a thing of the past. As for the, quote, independence of the Fed, unquote, the bankers, Wall Street, the ratings agencies, and the traders will care a lot about that, but the Fed is very unpopular with the country at large. It is hated by the right and the left, and it is unloved by the center and the 99%. Most people won't give a fig if its, quote, independence, unquote, is compromised by the 100T coin. Keeping the Fed independent, quote unquote, isn't worth, quote, austerity, unquote, unemployment, poor health insurance, failing infrastructure, poor schools, rising energy prices, student loan debt slavery, and all the rest to the 99%. If all these things were to end, along with the gradual disappearance of the national debt, the 99% would even celebrate the folding of the Fed into the Treasury Department and its subordination to the president. So that's the paper I promised you. I'll be happy.
Very reminiscent of Franklin D. Roosevelt.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, sounded like an FDR speech.
Unfortunately, it's not reminiscent of Joe Biden.
Oh, hell no.
But maybe we could get him to give it anyway. Okay, so there are some things to announce now. I'm not really near the end, but the first thing I want to announce is that tomorrow night, I won't be able to go past 10 o'clock on this program because Greg has his first stream tomorrow night on Facebook.
Now, so it's going to be on YouTube until I could tell you right now because I'm in Facebook jail for a while.
Oh, no. Jeez.
Yeah, that's why I've opted to create the YouTube channel. And according to Facebook, you can't go live for 65 days. You can't advertise for 65 days. You can't start or join any calls for 65 days. Your posts will be lowered in the feed for 65 days.
Okay.
All because I shared a meme equating the U.S. government to being a fascist government because of the merger between corporations and state, which is very true in what Mussolini had said.
Right. So Greg has been suspended for telling the truth, as so many other folks have been. Okay, in recent years. By the way, Scott Ritter, who also told the truth, just had his Twitter account restored after, I guess, about a year and a half of being suspended. That's but many other people who tell the truth have been blocked either by Facebook or YouTube. But fortunately, YouTube will be at Gregory's service next tomorrow at 10 p.m.
And
So
the
that
two Democrats that I'm going to cover, which will be a two-part segment, it's going to be covering the Georgia Democratic congressionals, the Democrats in Congress of Georgia. The first two I'm going to go over are going to be Lucy McBath and Nikema Williams.
great.
And it's going to be titled Dumping the Corruption, Georgia Congressional Dems, Part 1.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Okay, a second announcement that I want to make comes from a post by Stephanie Kelton, and she was on Substack today. Let me find it here. There it is.
Oh, and more good news. There's no more storm warnings across the state of Georgia.
Oh, that is very good news. But it's still raining where you are, right?
Yeah, it's going to be raining here for a good little while, I think. At least till about 11:30.
Okay, what you're seeing on your screen is a post from The Lens, which is Stephanie Kelton's Substack. And she says, Happy CPI Day. Good morning. We're minutes away from a December CPI report. I'll be on Bloomberg TV to talk about inflation, the Fed, and the macro outlook at 12:10 p.m. ET today. I couldn't see that, but I'm going to go back, okay, and look at it. I'm sure it'll be very interesting because, of course, the inflation rate declined today to 6.5%, which is the lowest that it's been in a long time. There's been a steady decline over the last 6 months. It's now at 6.5%. So, anyway, going on with our announcement, as I wrote last week, the December jobs report was full of good news. Let's hope the CPI report delivers more positive news about the pace at which inflation is receding. It did deliver more positive news. This evening at 8 p.m., she says, I'll be on the Mehdi Hassan show. We'll be talking about the debt ceiling and growing concern that some House members won't rule out the possibility of a voluntary default on the debt. So then she has a short clip from Steve Scalise threatening that the Republicans might want to cause a default on the debt. I'm not going to play that.
Kind of hard to default on something if you create it.
All right. But here's the announcement. This is her announcement now. And speaking of the debt ceiling, I'll be doing a live event at Columbia Law School on January 23rd to talk about one of the potential solutions to the problem. And yes, it involves a platinum. If you'd like to attend in person in New York or Oregon, you'll need to register at least 24 hours in advance. You can do that here, and there's a link to the registration. If you can't attend, but you'd like to hear the conversation, you can watch the live stream. And there's a link to the live stream. It's a Zoom call, basically. I'm coming out of Oregon and being managed by Rowan Gray and his group out there. Joe Wiesenthal, the stalwart from Business Insider, if he's still in Business Insider, I'm not sure if he is. He says, really excited about this January 23rd. I'll be participating in discussion with Rowan Gray, at Stephanie Kelton, and the living legend himself, the real deal, at Philip N. Deal. His name is spelled Diehl, the 35th director of the U.S. Mint on the $1 trillion coin, mintthecoin.org. Okay, and there are pictures here of Stephanie Kelton and Rowan Gray. Unfortunately, no pictures of Phil Deal. There was a picture up here of Joe Wiesenthal and either his son or daughter. That's his Twitter photo. So I'm now going to go to mintthecoin.org so you can see a few of these pages. But anyway, this is going to be a great event. And, I recommend everybody go to it. I'm going to go to it. I know that. And maybe before I say that, I should check on the times. But yes, it's at a very good time when I can go to it. It's from 12 p.m. to 1:20 p.m. on January 23rd. So that's going to work for me, of course. So going forward with that announcement, I'm going to share something from mintthecoin.org, which is a website that I believe is being run by Rowan Gray. And let me share that one with you. I'll be sharing a bunch of things right now with you. Won't take too long, just a few minutes. And we'll be done because it's all short stuff. Let's see if this is it. Nope, that's not it. That's not it. I think this is it. Okay, so this is the home page of mintthecoin.org, and it's got some resources on it. I didn't mean to pick up this page yet, so I'm going to stop sharing this, and instead I'm not going to share this. I got about 4 pages here to share, and I'm not. I got to find the right one. They're labeled similarly, so okay, it isn't easy to find the right one. But let me see if I can do a better job this time. I do have them lined up in order here, but oh, I see. This must be the first one. No. Let's see. This one? No. This one? Yeah, this was the first page that I wanted to share. Hashtag mint the coin. The Treasury Secretary may mint and issue proof platinum coins in accordance with such quantities and denominations as the Secretary in the Secretary's discretion may prescribe from time to time. So this gave the Secretary of the Treasury the authority to mint the proof platinum coins. This is from 31 U.S. Code, paragraph 51112, parenthesis K. So it's that short section that provides the authority. Then if you go to this page, there are some details from other pages on the site on how coin seigniorage works, the history of coin seigniorage, law. There's a FAQ, and there are other resources as well. And I'll be sharing some of these other pages as we move along here. It'll be pretty quick, but I want to show you what's available. Let's see what this is. That's the last one. I think this is the second one.
That's a good website.
It's a good website, yeah. This covers resources that are available. And I'm just going to scroll down so you can see all the links. These links are from 2000, they go from 2023 down to 2011. You can see that it picks up 6 articles, well, maybe 7 articles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 7 articles that have appeared in the last 6 days on the Platinum Coin, and it picks up all of those articles. There's one by Jamie Galbraith there that sets the right context, makes the right point, that the debt ceiling is a red herring. It certainly is a red herring. Then it picks up some 2022 articles, specifically a conversation article with former Mint directors Philip Deal, and Edmund Moy. That's a significant conversation. Picks up a good many articles from 2021 because people were wondering whether there was going to be a use for that in 2021. I don't have too much comment on this except that Felix Salmon wrote one of the early articles on the Platinum Coin in early July of 2011 at the time of an earlier debt ceiling crisis. His article was the first one that appeared in a major publication. That time it appeared in Reuters. So that was very noticeable. To this day, I suspect that it was Jamie Galbraith who got the Platinum Coin into Reuters at that point, which then triggered a lot of mainstream articles on the Platinum Coin. So here he is in 2021 with a further article on the Platinum Coin. There were a good many articles in 2021. I want to remark on Peter Weber's work here. I had a debate with Peter Weber, I believe it was in 2015. It's on the New Economic Perspectives site. He was at Brookings then, and what would happen is he started out with some criticisms of the Platinum Coin, and I replied. That he came back and I replied. There's something like 7 parts to this, and here he comes now, and he must have been converted to the Platinum Coin. By 2021, he was advocating for the Platinum Coin, which I think is very interesting. And I wanted to point that out because I had that 7-part debate with him, as I recall, sometime in 2015. Anyway, as we go down, you can see, there's another article from Felix Salmon. Joe Wiesenthal was one of the early people to pick this up in the fall of the 2012-2013 crisis, and he became friendly with Stephanie then, and they have been working together since then on various stuff. There's another piece by Felix Salmon. I did some Platinum Coin work during this period also. My papers on it were not picked up here.
These articles right there that you're skimming over would make for some good shows to discuss.
they would make for some very good shows, but you can't afford the time. In other words, I have Tuesdays and Thursdays to cover news from Empowering Democracy. I can't just keep on concentrating on, on articles about the platinum
Yeah.
coin. Okay, that's not really practical because our main focus here is on, dump the corruption. Now, it's relevant here to discuss the platinum coin because I explained the connection, to empowering democracy. But what I had to do here was to go over the basics and to make sure everybody understood them. There are very good people who wrote these articles. Generally speaking, these are all good references. There's an article, okay, from Randy Ray here is one of the, uh, I'll say the big four, okay, of MMT, because I'm going to put Stephanie in the big four. But if you put Stephanie in the big four of MMT, then the rest of the big four are Warren Mosler and Randy Ray, and Bill Mitchell, the Australian MMTer.
Oh man, I love Bill Mitchell.
Yeah, Bill Mitchell is great. He's probably the most rigorous of the MMT thinkers. Somehow a post of mine got in January 2013, $1 trillion coin, posts on legality and constitutionality. I say somehow because I originally published my Fixing the Debt book if I recall correctly, in January of 2013. The revised edition was done I believe in January of 2014. I might have my dates wrong about that, though. I have to look that up. Okay. But anyway, somehow the book escaped them. Okay, I don't know how it escaped this list because as I've said before, this is a very good list of resources as we go through these resources, but somehow there were a variety of articles that I did in 2014, more articles I did in 2013 because I was constantly blogging about the platinum coin. I also did many pieces in 2015 about the platinum coin. They all escaped notice here. And in addition, of course, my book, escaped notice here, as well. It has resources for the platinum coin. But there is one of my articles there, $1 trillion coin, posts on legality and constitutionality. And in 2012, they picked up one of my stories in December on the platinum coin, and then my piece on the origin and early history of platinum coin seigniorage in the blogosphere in December 8th. They didn't pick up any of my stuff on 2011, even though there was some pretty major stuff of mine in 2011. For example, at about the same time as Felix Salmon's piece, just a day or two later, I published a piece on naked capitalism about the platinum coin, which went over many of the basics. I also I must have published 10 pieces between the beginning of July and the first days of August, when the first flurry on the platinum coin had ended. And there are none of those pieces picked up here in that year, okay, in 2011. I was very, very active in that year. Okay. Uh, Now, Carlos Mucha's piece, which was the first piece on the platinum coin, the first full article, was published by Fire Dog Lake, which has now been taken over by Shadow Proof on January 3rd of 2011. I was working very closely, okay, with Beowulf, Carlos Mucha at that time, and I wrote my first piece on the platinum coin supporting what he had written on January 5th of 2011. There was also a very important piece that appeared on Warren Mosler's site, The Center of the Universe, if I recall correctly, on January 20th of 2011. In that piece, what Warren did was to summarize what I had said on January 5th, and this caused a huge discussion. All kinds of people were part of that discussion, including, if I recall correctly, Rowan Gray. And I think that was the date of his first exposure to platinum coin seigniorage. He was still at Columbia, okay, at that time, hadn't finished his law school, and hadn't finished, okay, his graduate studies, okay, as yet.
It just amazes me at how the coin has been a talking point as early as 2010 to 2012.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just very fascinating with me.
Oh, yeah. And this list of resources for 2011 is very, very skimpy because there were a couple of posts that I did between January and June, and then I and a couple of others did posts at the end of June of 2011. And then in July, there was an explosion of posts, including the Jack Balkin post, which was a very important one that is referenced here. But there was a Paul Krugman post in 2011 on the platinum coin, which isn't picked up here. Okay, it was interesting. I think that's interesting, but there were many other posts, okay, in many news outlets, okay, in 2011. Now, the most vigorous response to the coin was in 2012, 2013. You see all the listings in 2013 at the start of the year. But there were quite a number of posts, as I recall, between October and December of 2012. He has two posts of mine here, but many other people wrote posts during that period of time in the fall of 2012, because that's when the debt ceiling crisis then actually started. Okay, so this is skimpy on resources for 2011 and 2012. And of course, in 2013, it misses my book, okay, as a resource, and also the revision of my book in 2014. That book is the only full-length book on the platinum coin to appear still today, and it's not in these resources. That said, this is generally a pretty good list of resources, and I highly commend it, and you certainly should be going in, okay, and reading it, getting some of the history of the platinum coin and the changes, okay, and attitude about it. It's really interesting to track the changes from 2011, the beginning of 2011, okay, to today, because the articles we saw today on the platinum coin, in other words, the articles that have just appeared since the start of this year, they all seem to be favorable to the idea of using the platinum coin. There's utterly no opposition. But if you looked at the period 2011, there was all kinds of hostility to the platinum coin then. There was less hostility in 2012, 2013, but the hostility was still quite considerable. And even as late as 2015, that Brookings exchange that I had with Peter Weber during that period of time, that was a knockdown, drag out fight. This was as late as 2015. So the point is, people's attitudes have really changed. There seems to be a readiness to think about the platinum coin that was not there then. That's probably due to the progress of MMT generally in the community. It's probably also due to the success of Stephanie's book. But if you forgive me the pun, the platinum coin, I think, has much more currency now than it had in earlier years. And I think this certainly creates a better chance for it actually to be used by the administration. I know Joe Biden is going to be very much against using it. He'll want to mimic what Obama did in the summer of 2011 and what Obama did in late 2012 and 2013. However, I know that's going to be his tendency. However, when the pressure gets great, the pressure is on him. And these Freedom Caucus people and these crazy Republicans come at him with proposals to cut the heart out of Social Security and out of Medicare and out of his chance to have a decent presidency from here on in. He is going to want to find some way around this. And the platinum coin way around it is much less messy than the 14th Amendment way around it would be, and would in the end result in much less controversy than the 14th Amendment way around it would be. I should admit, though, that if he gets around it with $1 trillion platinum coin or anything between 1 and 5 trillion, will be much less controversial than if he goes after the ability to do debt terrorism at all, which is what I'm suggesting in my book and in my articles. Actually, I wrote my first article, which would have killed the debt terrorism forever, at the end of July in 2011. And every once in a while, whenever a debt ceiling thing comes up, I work on that for a while to argue for it again. But I'm convinced that's the best way to solve our problems. Go for broke, create a situation where the Republicans cannot repeal it because the horse would be out of the barn or the cow would be out of the barn.
Cut them off at the heads, as you say, but in the figurative sense.
Yes, of course, figurative way, but solve the problem. The problem is solved by the 100T platinum coin. Don't mint less than that. Get rid of the national debt. It is a political issue. It shouldn't be one. The MNTers can tell you all day long why it's not at all significant, to get rid of the debt. I think most of them favor just passing a bill in Congress to get rid of the debt limit law, altogether. That's what they would like to do because it's the minimal necessary change and would result in the minimal degree of controversy from their point of view. But that doesn't get rid of the debt terrorism problem, because the right was still going to hump on that and hump on that and hump on that.
Like a chihuahua.
Never quit
on a cord.
using debt terrorism as an excuse to do austerity. The 100T coin solution ends the austerity excuses for a considerable time. And during that time, we'll be able to mint other coins, or during that time, we'll be able to use overt congressional financing, otherwise known as OCF. That would be the permanent solution. That's a congressional level solution. If we could pass that and institutionalize just giving Treasury the money up front through adding to reserves, that would be the neatest way to do things, the absolute neatest way to do things. But for now, the coin is politically the best solution for this crisis, I think.
It would end it once and for all. The coin is the solution to ending the debt crisis as we know it.
The coin is the solution not just to ending the debt ceiling crisis, but deficit terrorism and austerity mongering.
Mm-hmm.
It kills all those birds with one stone. It's a game changer.
Yes. Big game changer.
It's a major game changer, and everybody needs to be discussing the coin.
Yes, because we're so sick of this. Over and over again, the games they play.
Okay, so there are two other pages on the mintthecoin.org site. I'm not going to go into them here. I was, but
I'm gonna go over to your YouTube.
we're at 10:32. Okay, already 10:33. Okay, so I'm not going to go over those, but I'm just going to commend them to you. There's a page there on inflation and the coin, and there's another page there on short statements from the law that show the legal justification for the coin. And that's a very useful and very good page. Okay, as well. Okay, so those two pages are notable also.
I'm gonna take these articles on the Mint from the Mint the Coin website and put them over in our Facebook chat so that way we can go back and locate them later on rather than having to chase them down.
Okay, that is very good. I have put the links to them in the description.
Yeah, that's where I'm getting that from.
And
I'm also
don't forget the link to my book as well.
Yes, and you see what Russell Goldman just said? He has, I heard
No.
Crystal and Sega dive into the Mint Coin today. He said it made me, I keep having these posts here, made me immediately think of you, Joe. We were talking about this in 2016.
Yeah, we were talking about it in 2011 and 2012 and 2013. We're talking about it in all those years, of course.
Yeah, so Russell Goldman, I think we all think of you when people bring up Mint Coin.
Well, I think my Facebook friends do,
Yes.
but I don't think the larger MMT community does. Okay, because the academic part of the MMT community has not embraced my work. In part, I think because after a certain period of time, they thought if they pushed the mint the coin idea, that would detract from their reputation as serious economists.
if I were
Never been ready to pick it up since. And there's opposition from Warren Mosler too. In the recent panel, that we had on KRTD Media. The first panel, okay, of New Year's Day. Well, I guess it wasn't the first panel New Year's Day. It was the 10 a.m. panel on New Year's Eve. I was on that panel with Warren, Jeff Epstein, okay, and a few others. And
Jeff
Warren and
Epstein
I,
is an amazing person.
huh?
Jeff Epstein is a sincerely amazing person.
Oh, yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Just like you are. Y'all are both amazing people. And I think y'all think of y'all more like family.
Okay, well, you know, Warren Mosler is an amazing person too.
Oh man, he is on the top amazing. He's over the top. And I shared on Facebook the other day one of his quotes and I tagged him in it. And he liked the post that I tagged him in. And anytime I do that, whether it's him, Fadl Kaboom, or any of the others, even yourself, and y'all like that, it's like, oh man, this is. I start getting like balloon headed.
Okay, well, Warren and I disagreed about use of the platinum coin on New Year's Eve in that panel. And it's interesting to go back there and to look at what he said, why he wasn't for it. He also, a couple 3 years ago, Steve had him on, and he again said something negative about the platinum coin, even though on that January 20th of 2011, he had the platinum coin featured on his site, and there was this amazing discussion from there must have been 400 comments from all kinds of people. Every problem with the platinum coin was brought up in that particular discussion, first brought up in that particular discussion. It was an amazing discussion, and it should be on his site now because it's such an important discussion. But after a while, he took it off. But at that time, he was very much for the platinum coin.
I think that platinum coin is the solution to every problem that we're faced with as a nation.
Well, I don't know if I would go that far, but it certainly is the solution to political problems surrounding our use of the monetary sovereignty capability.
I know if I were running for Congress, part of my economic policy that I would adopt to my platform would be minting the coin. That would be one thing I would be for in Congress is mint the damn coin.
Yeah,
I would be a vocal advocate in Congress for MMT, and I would make everybody look very bad whenever it comes to the economic terrorism that they're perpetuating against the American public. I would be, instead of the deficit owl, I would be the deficit duck on Capitol Hill.
Okay, I would be pleased to see that. But I also caution that one has to press on things like the $100 million coin, not on things like the $1 trillion coin or the $2 trillion coin, because they don't stop. They're too small to stop the debt terrorism.
It's going to take a whole army of deficit owls.
It's going to take a whole army of deficit owls, but it's also going to take a demonstration that the national debt can be gotten rid of when you have the proceeds of a large enough coin. Because that's the only thing that's going to persuade people that we always have the capability to get rid of the debt. And we have a continuing capability to make it lower and lower and lower. That will persuade people that it's not a problem, and that anybody who says it is a problem is full of shit.
Very full of shit.
Yep. Okay, so there it is. That
one
was the
thing-
solution. I also gave you the lay of the land on it. And we'll see what happens. I've obviously been doing lots of programs where I come back to the platinum coin until this crisis is over.
Oh, by the way, did you see where the Gower Institute for Modern Money Studies has released a new MMT book called Modern Monetary Theory, Key Insights, Leading Thinkers, and it's edited by L. Randall Ray, Phil Armstrong, Sarah Holland, Claire Jackson Pryor. I don't know how to pronounce those other two names, but yeah.
You mean Patricia Pino?
Her name is not on the book cover.
That surprises me.
Yeah, neither is. I'll share the screen real quick to present it. So that way I could show everybody what the name of the book is. And this is what the name of the book is right here. So I figured I would promote this tonight on the show since we're on the topic of MMT.
Go ahead.
It's by a very great group out of the UK.
Okay, I added it to the stream.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make it.
But I figured I would share that portion of what they are doing as well. They're releasing their own MMT book, which the more MMT books we have, the better. We can never have too many.
Okay, have you any idea how many MMT books I've written?
I lost count.
You're cheating. Do you have an idea?
About 12, 15, something like that.
No. I've written 7 MMT books.
I remember the very first MMT book I read, and it was Warren Mosler's 7 Deadly Innocent Frauds of Economic Policy.
That was the first MMT book that I read too.
And that's what really opened and it was the free version. It was the PDF version that I downloaded to my phone.
Yes.
And I read that thing. It's not a long book, though.
Oh, it's not a long book, but it was a brilliant book.
And then I started this was when I was in my infancy of being an MMTer. When I was in the infancy stage of it, and then I read that book, and then it got me to thinking a lot more clearly on monetary policy.
Oh, yes. Got me thinking a lot more clearly about monetary policy, too.
The next book, that book that I showed you, the one from Gims in the UK, there is like £100 plus shipping and handling. And one thing I would like to do in terms of education policy is have every student sent home with a copy of The Deficit Myth when they're taking economics courses and such. That every single student across the United States, whether they're high school age or college age, when they're learning about macroeconomics in schools, they need to learn the macroeconomic operational reality, as Rocco Million eloquently put it so many times. Man, I miss Rocco. He was so amazing when he would do his lives. He's somebody else I really miss watching.
Yeah, I miss Rocco too.
Here, I really enjoyed watching him as well. But he's into
Into
the
stock.
finances. Yeah, stocks with the finances and stuff.
He's going to make money.
Who else was it that I really liked watching there for a long time? Jeff Ginter.
Yeah,
Yes.
I like Jeff very much too. He was eloquent.
He was the one that took on that congressman and then destroyed him when it
I
comes
know.
to healthcare policy.
I know that was exciting, wasn't it, when he did that?
He said that video has come back to haunt him on numerous occasions
Really, why?
because anytime somebody met him, they would automatically find that video on YouTube and then send it to him. I remember when he shared that video on his show, and I was like, "Golly, this dude's a real badass."
Yeah.
But he speaks so nicely.
Yeah.
You know, he can
Yeah.
really get in there and say things, but he just says it so pleasantly and nicely.
Well, I thought he was very fiery about it, actually.
Yes.
He was very fiery about it. We have a lot of comments here to go over. So,
Well, go to answer Ghost Start right there about Ginter and Facebook. He has not been on Facebook in probably a year or two.
you know where he's posting?
Where
He's posting on LinkedIn.
that's where he moved to.
I have seen him on LinkedIn. So, if you're looking for his stuff, he's probably on there. I warn you that about a year ago, I guess it must have been, maybe it was a little before then, he decided he was against state level single payer efforts, for MMT reasons that the state,
Oh,
use its own currency, though, so there's some likelihood that the states could run into fiscal problems and wouldn't be able to support single payer for some time. But he and I had some disagreements on that.
I have to admit something about that, and Dee can vouch for this. At first, I was very skeptical of state-based single payer, and then I changed my tune after maybe a 45-minute to an hour conversation with Laura Fielding.
Ah,
So she changed my tune. Like Laura Fielding is what changed my tune on that. And then
Yes, it did.
Dee, and then I told Dee that I had a really good conversation with Laura Fielding, and I was like, "Yeah, this is something I could support now." Like I was extremely skeptical at first. Then Laura
Yes, you
Fielding
were.
walked me through it.
Yes, and that's what I
Laura
went
Fielding,
and hooked you up with a lot of different people because I said they will talk to you, Greg.
the way
Yeah.
I got involved with Laura Fielding is that, well, first of all, uh, okay, I was in this effort. I was really organizing this effort to get Nancy Pelosi out on January 3rd of 2021. And for some reason, the Red Berets took up that call. So I had that involvement with them on that other issue, not on the single payer issue, but on the, we better get rid of Nancy Pelosi so that we can do Medicare for all. Okay. But then
I'll be right back.
about June, I guess was it June I think it was the end of May of 2000, okay, in 21. It turned out that Laura and the Red Berets were getting smeared by Steve, okay, and his RP gang.
Yes, I was part of all that too. The stuff they were saying.
You were involved, okay, and Amber called my attention to that. And when I saw those arguments, okay, I knew that Steve and RP were wrong. So I put my hat into the ring, and I became the MMTer that defended the state level single payer movement. After that, I was working very closely with Laura and Lisa. That's how I got to know Lisa, okay, as well. And we've been working together more or less since that time. I say less because there wasn't much I could do to contribute, to the whole Washington movement because much of that was on the ground there, and I couldn't be a part of that. I did support them, every chance I got on streams.
Right, and you gave them FaceTime, on your shows and stuff.
I gave them FaceTime continuously on my shows, but over the last 9 months or so, they've been completely devoted to whole Washington and pushing whole Washington because of the signature drive,
Right.
for the initiative, and I couldn't do much to help them there. So I haven't been working that closely with Laura for that period of time, but for a while we were working very, very closely together. And the funny thing was, it was about the reasons why the MMT concerns did not apply to what Laura was trying to do. So that was very interesting. Okay, so I think. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to get into these.
Yes.
Okay, so what was I supposed to answer? Did Steve? Oh, here we go. This is. I guess I got to go back to the beginning at least to scan.
But yeah, I was very skeptical of state funded, state based Medicare for all at first.
Okay, well, by the end of my involvement with that, actually, not too soon after the beginning of my involvement with that, okay, I got to look at Gerald Epstein's stuff on financing it, and I could see that he was right, that there would really be no problem, okay, in financing it. And this should not be too surprising, okay, because Warren Mosler has insisted that if we had a Medicare for All program, it would cost only half of what we were spending now. And David Himmelstein and Stephanie Woolhandler had done some cost estimates in 2018 showing that the federal government was already spending $2.6 trillion, okay, on healthcare. So if Warren says we could save half of what we were coming close to spending then, that was getting close to $4 trillion, still getting close to $4 trillion. Half of that would be $2 trillion.
Yeah, well, every time a state, like the last time we had with California, when California was trying to do that with the state, Grumbine always sends his minions in there.
Yes, he always did.
Yeah.
So it's like you get used to the battle between the California battle, the whole Washington battle. Whoever brings it up, and they always repeat themselves over and over again. It's the same thing, and you try to say something to them, and it's just back and forth, but they don't listen.
Yes, yes. They are not debating in good faith.
No.
Never have been.
They are not debating to get closer to the truth. They're debating to win the argument.
Even the funds from cannabis taxation could fund that.
Oh yeah.
Funds from cannabis taxation could do much, but it's also true, just to summarize, that if the state were acting as a Medicare Advantage provider, that could fund state single payer. Yeah, Gerald Epstein showed that in his financial analysis.
And Medicare Advantage is literally causing Medicare to be severely undercut and underfunded.
Right, but if the state got into Medicare Advantage, then the state could drive the private companies out of business because they have to make a profit on Medicare Advantage where the state doesn't have to do that. So, in other words, if the states actually tried to fund it in that way, it would be it would just be very beneficial all around. Not only would the money problem be solved, but it would get rid of Medicare Advantage across the United States.
And that's why we
because
need
the private companies can't compete. They're in the Medicare Advantage business to make a profit. But the states would not be in the Medicare Advantage business to make a profit. They'd only be in the Medicare Advantage to cut costs. So they could survive with probably a loss ratio of maybe 90% or something like that. Whereas the private companies are in it because they can get up to a loss ratio of 50%. So the financials would all be in favor of the Medicare Advantage competitors, that was state governments, would be able to drive all the private companies out of business. I mean, that's a terrific irony, but that's what would happen. Anyway, suffice it to say that Steve and his minions didn't know what they were talking about.
No.
They just hadn't gotten into the details, and they didn't have a well-grounded numerical financial case, which Gerald Epstein had. In other words, he may be a post-Keynesian who still believes in taxing and spending, but sometimes you get to see whether a tax and spend approach can produce a surplus for you. And he showed that it could, and that surplus could create a buffer that would support the state level programs in times of need. He showed in 3 years that there would be enough of a surplus that without any federal spending at all on the program, the state of Washington and the state of Massachusetts would be able to fully fund 1 year of spending, 1 whole year of spending just out of its normal tax coffers. I heard Crystal and Sager dive into the mint, the coin today. Made me immediately think of you, Joe. We were talking about this in 2016. Well, thank you, Russ. I'm glad you thought of me. Anyway, Ghost Start says Bipartisan Policy Center estimated as of June 22nd that the date for hitting the debt ceiling limit is no earlier than the third quarter of 2023. Yeah, that's what Mike Norman thinks also. He thinks that we'll be hitting that ceiling sometime in September 2023. I guess he puts it even later in terms of it representing a problem, from the standpoint of, creating a drain out of the private sector. Ghostnut said, Jeff got pretty good pretty fast. You mean Jeff Genter? And Steve Wolfbrand says, I got to get to bed in a minute. Thanks for staying up so late, Steve. Kay says, night, Steve. I won't be far behind you. Night, night. Kostat says, I'm just hitting stride. Face green, smiling. Steve Wolfbrand said, run, Gregory. Russ Goldman says, enjoyed hanging out tonight. I knew that you'd be covering this topic, but I need to call it a night. Take care, Joe. Take care, Russ. You too. Yeah, Russ and I are real old friends. Steve Wolfbrand says, I got to cash. I'll give TY. I'm not sure what that means, but I'll give you 6 minutes. It's at 10:45. It's now 11:01. Not even sure if I've gotten through to my Citibank corporate accountant, sister face, red, droopy eyes. She did tell me they're pulling out of several countries, but couldn't say where. She said it was a BFD. BFD, Citibank getting out of a few countries. I didn't see much of Ginter since my Facebook ban. I don't care if I agree or not. There's no way I wouldn't support the good people involved. Body blue raised arms. Thanks, Steve. Steve Goldstart. I've been getting bombarded with advantage flyers, face orange browning. Yeah, me too. Kay Ryan says, I hate those ads. Me too. PSA, Priscilla Presley, 54, died suddenly. Face.
Yeah, Lisa Marie Presley.
Yes, it was Lisa Marie Presley who died, right?
Yes, the daughter.
She was the daughter, right? Yeah, Priscilla
Yes,
Presley
54.
is still alive. How old is Priscilla Presley? She must be in her 70s now, right?
I would assume so.
Yeah. And Kay Ryan said, yes, I saw that. So I guess
She is currently 77.
77. It's a shame. It's a shame to see your child die before you.
And sadly, that happens a lot. More, it happens more often than you think.
Yeah, it probably does. Bonnie and I have been lucky so far. We haven't had that kind of problem.
Wish my parents could say the same because I've lost two brothers.
Yeah, I wish they could say the same too, Greg.
Yeah, and you were there for me throughout all of that, checking in on me, making sure I'm okay.
Yeah, it's awful.
Like there was that was like during the time I had to leave the chat on Facebook just to focus on myself.
Oh, I know you did. Yeah.
Well, it's such a shock.
Yeah, it's such a shock, and there's just
It's traumatizing.
there's just a whole lot of grief to do.
My grief has gotten so bad to the point to where I've had to start seeing a therapist.
Yeah. Sometimes therapists are necessary.
Well, it's very hard to process what you've been through.
Yep. Yeah, I didn't process my grief when my mother died. She died when I was 21. I never processed my grief until I was 33. I repressed it all through that period of time.
And the worst thing I had to do was sharing my brother's obituary. And when I saw that, that's when I went into complete emotional shock. Like I sat right here writing out the post for about 10 to 15 minutes on Facebook before I could even post it. And I literally had an emotional meltdown.
Yeah, but
It's
in the
hard
end,
to process that. It's hard to really look at it as reality, the shock.
yeah, it's hard to process it. But I'm sure posting it on Facebook think in the end helped. It just helps to get things off your chest like that and not swallow them up. Okay, my friends, I think it's time to say goodnight.
Good night, everyone.
Tomorrow night, I guess I should say, tomorrow night, I'll be back with coverage of Congress people and any news that has occurred in the Congress that is related to dumping the corruption.
And I'll also be doing the first episode of Dumping the Corruption in Georgia with coverage. I'm going to be covering all 5, and I'm going to break it down into 2 separate episodes where I do the first 2, which are going to be the obvious ones, members of the CPC, and the other 3 are non-CPC members.
Okay, that will be different and good. And so altogether, if you're doing 5 tomorrow and I'm doing 3,
I'm going to be doing 2 tomorrow night, and then Sunday night I'll be live again at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific, over on the Revolution Evolution YouTube channel.
okay, so if you're doing 2 tomorrow and I'm doing 3 tomorrow, then we'll be doing together 5 tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then you'll be doing an additional 3 on Sunday?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll probably be sitting in on that. Just to help out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm probably going to share that one in some Georgia groups just to piss some people off. I really don't care if it makes them mad or not. Oh, I'm going to post them in Georgia groups, and hopefully they'll get angry. Some won't.
You never know. You never know, Greg. You might as well. Might as well
do it because I'm going to be waking up a lot of Georgia Democrats.
Well, that's what you got to do. Wake them up. Wake them up.
Okay, so thanks for helping tonight, folks.
You're welcome.
Yes. Thank you for having us, and
Okay,
I'll be live tomorrow at 8 p.m.
Okay, I'll be there.
Thank you.
Later, taters.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Steve lasted right till now, right till the end. Said, okay, to bed, and then